Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. For today, Friday, April 24th, you're watching TechStrong TV. Welcome. If you haven't watched TechStrong TV before, we stream this every day, Monday to Friday, for about anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. We're trying to bring you some good news. We're trying to bring you some tech news. We're trying to keep everyone connected to the community, collaboration, what's going on out here, what other people are thinking. We hope you find it interesting. Whether you're joining us on the web, at TechStrong TV, Digital Anarchist, or any of the media ops site, DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, welcome. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, or our YouTube DevOps TV Live link, welcome. Or maybe you're watching it on your phone, your tablet, or your TV on the DevOps.com app, on Roku, Apple TV, or Amazon Fire. Again, welcome. We try to distribute this as widely as possible. It is available on demand, so if you're not watching the stream, which starts live at 9:30, Monday to Friday a.m., that's okay too. Thanks for joining us is the important thing. We've got a special edition TechStrong TV today for you on Friday. More than half of our show, a third of our show today, is really a rebroadcast of a recent virtual event that just happened a day or two ago, and it's put on by Qualys, and it's part of VMDR, their new platform that really represents about 20 years of security practices, development, getting to the point where we can really get a handle on what you have in your network, what its security posture is, what vulnerabilities there are, what can be patched, what can be secured, and how so, and giving you visibility into all of that. It's about an hour and a half long. We're going to show the VMDR virtual event in its entirety. But before we do that, we're actually going to have two quick interviews, one with Philippe Courteau, the CEO, chairman of Qualys, and really a pioneer in the info security space, kind of legendary, and the president of Qualys, Sumedh Thakar, is going to join us as well to intro this event. We'll be doing a deep dive next week on it as well with an all-star panel of analysts and customers, and I'll tell you more about that later. But that's going to take up the first hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes of our show today. I'll come back with some news. We're going to go over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, who has the CEO of Clockwise, Matt Martin, on today. And then, of course, we'll head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley of Accelerated Strategies Group with his thoughts for the day. That'll wrap us up for the week. It'll send you guys off on what we hope will be a great weekend. Hopefully things are getting better where you are. The curve is flattening. Everyone's starting to settle in and feel a little bit more at ease with what we are dealing with. So with that, let me take a quick commercial and we'll be right back with Philippe Courteau.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong. Featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
All right, as I mentioned, we're going to kick today's show off with an interview with Philippe Courteau. Philippe founded Qualys about 20 years ago. He's kind of legendary in the security space. He built Qualys into a very successful public company and continues to guide it and lead it, very hands-on day to day. Philippe, you know, the VMDR that we're going to be talking about today is really Philippe's brainchild from a long time ago when he recognized that just vulnerability management wasn't going to be enough. He'll tell you more about it. Let's go to our interview with Philippe Courteau, CEO, chairman of Qualys.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm really happy to have Philippe Courteau, CEO, Chairman of Qualys, joining us today. As you know, we have a special edition of TechStrong TV today that is featuring the recent VMDR virtual event that Qualys put on just a day or two ago in its entirety. So if you weren't able to make the event, here's a great opportunity for you to see what went on there. And I thought even making it better than the original, we would have Philippe come on and sort of introduce what it is you're about to see from this virtual event. Philippe, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much, and my pleasure. Yes, so now this is going to be a great event for us because it has been many years in the making, and in fact, as many of you know, we started with vulnerability management, and of course, in order to do a very good vulnerability management program, you need to not only have a good view of your global IT asset inventory, you need to identify your vulnerabilities, you need to prioritize them, you need to remediate. It's very complex. It took us a long time to put all the pieces together as one single application. And this is what VMDR stands for, Vulnerability Management, Detection, and Response. One single app. And with that app, what you will see is that one, you can identify any device that connects to the network. You can then, of course, create your global IT asset inventory across on-premise, endpoint, cloud, containers, web applications, OT and IoT devices, and mobile environment. One single platform can help you do that very automatically, in fact. From there, you can identify the vulnerabilities across that entire hybrid environment. If you use our agent and the combination of our agent, and I will discuss about the technologies behind, then you have also the notion of real time. And then we have perfected our prioritization engines where you can have multiple filters. So that would give you a very good idea, and according to your own environment, not just with the CVEs and the severity, but what is the most important for you to remediate, because there's so many vulnerabilities that you cannot do it anyway. And then some may be severe, but not reachable. So in that sense, you're not as exposed, of course. And then, of course, it's from there to remediate or to mitigate. That's one single application. So how do we do that? So the way we do that is that we started in the old good days through scanning, like, your network to identify those devices which were there. And then, of course, we perfected that technology. The problem, and today we run about 3 billion scans a year. The problem with the scanning is that it's not real time. It's also pretty heavy because if you want to really have good information, you need to have what is called authenticated scans, which means you need to have the credential of the device. You need to, of course, have scanning windows, and all of that is pretty complex. So we introduced quite a few years ago our agent technology. Our agents are very unique in the sense that they are very small, a piece of code, less than 3 megabytes, that you could install in wherever you can install them, and they beam up the changes that occurs on the device. So it gives us the entire view from an IT security and compliance point of view of the device, that where you have been able to put an agent. And we have now today more than 30 million agents today out there, collecting significant amount of course, of information continuously. And then we have added now very recently the passive scanning technology, as it's called, or the network analysis, where now whenever something connects to the network, we immediately know, and we can identify through a combination of machine learning and other technology that what is that device. And then you can decide whether this is a wrong device, whether this is a device you need to manage, and then you will put an agent on it, etc. And then on the top of that, we have also the network analysis. And all that information comes into one single backend, including connectors that we have created to get the data out of your Azure or Google. So we bring all that information into one single place where we have now built, we have about 140 open source engines. We have built that at huge scale. For example, we index 3 trillion data points on our Elasticsearch clusters. We move about 5 billion messages a day on our Kafka bus. We pump on Cassandra about 1 million writes per second, and on and on and on and on. So we build the thing at huge scale. So VMDR is more than vulnerability management as a single app. It's also become the platform that collects all of that information for even other purposes. So for example, we are going to launch relatively soon, the ability, and we have to detect IOC, and we have expanded the agent capabilities to do the response as well. And so we're also moving into other dimensions because of that platform that we have built, which collect all the security and IT and compliance data that you really need. And that's what makes VMDR very unique.
Absolutely, because it's more, I mean, in Philly, listening to you talk, I'm having flashbacks of the last 15, 20 years of my life. These were the problems we've always dealt with, right? With scanning. You could be internal, you could be external, but you couldn't scan if you were going to bring down the network during business. You needed credentials, all of these things you're dead on. The other thing, though, is in today's world, it's more than just the vulnerability data we need. We need to understand what is on it. When our networks are far-flung all over the world in cloud data centers and here and there, we need to know what is on our network, what really are our assets, let alone what are their vulnerabilities, what is their current posture. I mean, and so to me, the world screams for this kind of solution. But there's two things I wanted to hit on with you, and if you wouldn't mind. Number one, just undertaking this mission, because that's what it is, a mission. To undertake this mission required Qualys themselves to undergo their own digital transformation, to be able to scale. I mean, look, you were in the cloud before there was a cloud. I know personally. But the scale of this it demanded that you underwent a digital transformation with DevOps and Agile and everything else that we hear about, all of these cloud native and open source. And I don't know and I've spoken to Dilip about it, right? And it's a tremendous story of you don't undertake this without undergoing yourselves a major transformation.
Oh, no, absolutely. And there is also another dimension. I will come back to your point. There's another dimension. If you look at what happened to our industry, there's been significant money which has been thrown into that market. There's so many companies which have essentially been born, and it was the race for growth. That's something that we resisted, because the problem is that if you go all the way for growth, then how do you get there? Building a platform like the one that we have built is not a walk in the park. We started with a very primitive architecture, which was a LAMP architecture, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. Then we had to evolve. And of course, we have done our entire digital transformation. We removed, for example, 70% of our VMware dependency. We have containerized application, everything's microservices. We injected Elasticsearch and now Kafka. And again, 140 open source engine. We have integrated our solutions with the CI/CD pipeline as well. So all of that digital transformation, we have done it, but we could not, because our market when we started was not big enough. Vulnerability management was kind of a small market. So we had to be patient. We could have acquired company and stitch this company together like we have seen so many other companies do. The problem is that it doesn't really work well on the enterprise, but in the cloud, it's almost impossible. Today, you have to really organically build all of that. So it did require patience. And despite the fact that we're public and we had a lot of pressure for growth, we always resisted. And interesting enough, because we were so disciplined at what we're doing, we ended up building a significantly, extremely profitable model, which allows us to essentially continuing investing in the platform. So it's all about the platform, stupid, if I may say so. And that's where the unique differentiator that Qualys brings. And as we move into other bigger markets now, we're very close to that, then I think people will realize that, in fact, especially now, unfortunately, I would say with COVID, people realize that you cannot continue throwing people at the problem. You cannot continue add all these different applications. You need to consolidate your stack, and you need to move into the cloud. And so that's something that Qualys really helps, because on one hand, we can help our customers consolidate their stacks, eliminate significant costs, gain real time, have better visibility. And then on the other hand, we can help them secure their digital transformation as well, which is what we've been doing very well with Microsoft, integrating our agent with Azure, and you will see more announcements to come in that same direction as well.
Absolutely. And Philippe, the fact that we're interviewing you from home and the whole world is on quarantine only accelerates this. I think it puts a magnifying lens that it's not a question of throwing more people. If you don't move to the cloud, companies that didn't move to the cloud before this are finding themselves kind of behind the eight ball here, right? So we're going to see more and more of that as we emerge from
absolutely
from this present situation.
Absolutely. And this is the way I've always looked at Amazon in a very, there is some similarities. Obviously, Amazon has built a significant company. But what I saw in Amazon is that they first understood very clearly that they needed to build a cloud platform just even to ship the books. And then, of course, the cost was tremendous because they wanted to do that at the scale of the planet. And then, of course, they were very smart to say, oh, what about if I essentially put that as a subsidiary, and that came AWS, so I could, in a way, pay for this huge development effort. Yep. But what they saw, which I didn't see early on, is the fact that for them, the distribution, they built 100 distribution centers, all automated. And of course, Wall Street was complaining because they were not growing fast enough.
Profitable.
Spending,
yep.
They were not profitable enough, but they were investing. And today, look at the position that Amazon is into. It's absolutely incredible. Yep. People have now, like me, for example, I only shop on Amazon now. Why? Because I've got everything. And it comes to me.
You and me both.
Whole food, I can get it on wherever I want. And I don't have to worry about everything. All the information is there. And so that's absolutely...
It's an amazing experience they've built.
And I think security is going exactly into the same direction. And that's what I really believe that Qualys is extremely well positioned.
Perfect. We need to wrap up, but so folks are going to now spend an hour and a half at this VMDR live event. They understand what VMDR is. What should they look for on today's sessions, Philippe? Any highlights?
Oh, I think just look at how this is one single application. I mean, this is quite remarkable of putting that complexity where you can identify devices, create automatically your global IT inventory, find all your vulnerabilities, prioritize them, remediate them, mitigate them in one single application with all the workflows integrated. And this is absolutely this is a beautiful cloud application. And by the way, we also can deliver it on premise as well, because the way we architected our cloud, we have today 85 private platforms, which are the same code base, but that we can deliver on premise for those companies or in some geographies where the data cannot leave, if you prefer, the country or the premises of the company.
Again, another one of the advantages of microservices and containers. You can do stuff like that. Yeah,
of course, because the updates, etc. Now we continuous, everything is centrally managed and self-updating. That's, of course, really need a lot of cost in doing so. Absolutely.
Sure. All right, Philippe, thank you. We want to get to our event, though. We're going to take a deeper dive next week on VMDR. I don't know if you'll be on, or maybe Sumedh or someone. But for our audience, we're going to show you this today, and then next week we're going to maybe have some analysts, some customers, and we're going to take a good look at VMDR.
Very good. Yeah.
Philippe, thank you so much. Stay well, stay healthy. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Okay, back here in the studio. Before we go to the Qualys VMDR event in its entirety, I wanted to also now play this interview that I just did with Sumedh Thakkar. Sumedh is the president of Qualys and really kind of led the charge here on VMDR from a product point of view and development, and he'll give us some really good insights into it. So let's now go to Sumedh Thakkar, president of Qualys.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, back here in the studio, and as part of our special coverage of the Qualys VMDR event that we're going to be showing in its entirety today, I invited Sumedh Thakkar, president of Qualys, and really one of the driving forces behind the whole VMDR product and suite and platform, if you will. And I've asked Sumedh to come on here, and you've heard from Philippe. He gave you the whole reason behind VMDR, but Sumedh's going to talk specifically about what you're going to see for the next 90 minutes or so, which is a deep dive here on the Qualys event around it. Sumedh, welcome to TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alan. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
All right. So Sumedh, I'm going to put the onus on you here. Share with our audience, what are they about to see and what should they be looking for?
Yeah, so VMDR is an app that we really put together, which if you take a step back, right now, there's a few things happening. One is the number of devices that organizations have to manage is exploding with IoT and work from home, remote. You're seeing now with COVID, a lot of people suddenly working from home. So this notion that I have a data center and I have my devices right there and I can manage and just keep an eye on them is completely changed. So which means that you have many devices, which means that they have more vulnerabilities, a large number of vulnerabilities, and people are just right now struggling to figure out what to focus on to make sure that they secure themselves, right? At the end of the day, the reason to patch these vulnerabilities is that you want to make sure that you are not getting compromised because you didn't patch in time. And that involves a certain number of things that have to happen. First, you have to know the device, right? If you don't know the device, you're not going to be able to secure it. So you got to have a strong and good asset inventory. You got to be able to detect the vulnerabilities in real time. So the days of scanning once a month are gone. You need to have real-time visibility. And then after that, you need a prioritization, right? And the prioritization has to be, what do I fix first? I have this hundreds and thousands of vulnerabilities that are showing up. Which ones are really being attacked? Which ones are really going to cause harm to me versus the ones that are good to fix so that they don't become a problem in the future versus the ones that are a problem right now. And then the last piece has to be, okay, you do all that work, and you know what needs to be done, but how do you do it? And how long does it take for you to get something patched? So traditionally, these have been like different siloed organizations, siloed tools. And it's just taken a long time for people to get from detecting the device to patching the device. So what VMDR uniquely does, it's an app that has a workflow that essentially brings all these four capabilities together in a seamless workflow, providing many different ways to detect asset discovery, asset inventory, many different ways to detect vulnerabilities, very powerful capabilities to prioritize by bringing the context of the asset, and then the ability to patch also, so that you can be secure much more quickly than having to go through multiple tools and teams. And that's really if I had to set the stage of what VMDR is going to be, that's what VMDR is, and that's what you will see in the 90 minutes or so. We had a great event. Over 200 questions came in. Almost 3,000 people signed in to watch the event live. So we're very excited about it.
Excellent. So, I mean, at some point, and we are in the next week or so, we're going to take a deeper dive into the functionality of VMDR, Sumedh, and because there's, it's hard to even, and you did a good job, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to put your hands around all of the different aspects that are under this umbrella. But for now, I want to focus in on. So this was an event that just took place in the 2 days ago or so, 3 days ago. It was filmed live, as you broadcast live, with about 200 questions from the audience. But are people going to see demos of the product? What should they expect to see in this, upcoming video?
Yeah, so I'm going to set the stage just to explain a little bit initially with some slides on, just like I explained right now, what are the 4 key things that we are bringing together in that seamless workflow. But once that is done, then I really go into a live demo, right? And we'll talk a little bit after this on the prioritization aspect, and that's where really I focus on. Of course, there's the inventory detection I showcase, and I showcase the vulnerability detection, which everybody knows Qualys does a fantastic job at detecting vulnerabilities. But the real amazing piece about VMDR is that ability to do the prioritization by looking at the threat and the asset context. So I go through about 5 real examples of how people have different situations and how the VMDR is going to actually help them prioritize much better by weeding out things that they don't need to do, and then also showcase how that they can click a button and patch. And so that forms a big part of this event, because at the end it's about seeing live instead of just talk. And then after that, we have a really good conversation with one of our customers who has been an active a member of the Qualys design partner program, and who has given us a lot of feedback over the last few years. And so Daryl Peterson from ATN International is going to talk about his own experience and his own challenges and things that he has liked about VMDR and things that we should focus on making it better for the upcoming releases. So it's a pretty interactive event.
Fantastic. Sounds good. I think, you know what? You might have just nailed it right there, Sumedh, and we shouldn't go any further. Let's bring people into the Qualys VMDR event to take a look. And you know what? For anyone who may have questions coming out of this, we do have our Slack community channel open at techstrongtv.slack.com. You can get an invite to it at techstrong.tv. And if you have more questions that you see coming out of this, please post them onto the Slack channel. We'll get them over to you, Sumedh, and I know you guys are doing a follow-up with you had so many questions you couldn't answer them all. We'll add those to the batch as well and get them over to you. All right? Sumedh Thakkar, he just set the table. Now let's go to the Qualys VMDR event, and we'll bring it up right now.
Hello to you all. And first, I hope that you and your family are safe and doing well. And thanks for attending VMDR Live. VMDR, which stands for Vulnerability Management, Detection and Response, is an important milestone for Qualys and for our customers. As with VMDR, we are truly bringing vulnerability management to its next level with unprecedented ease of deployment, extremely low false positive, with no software to maintain or update. In fact, VMDR has been many years in the making, and I would like to thank all of our customers who gave us precious feedback, and our engineers who have been working very hard to make VMDR happen. VMDR is not what some people have characterized as a bundle of existing Qualys solutions. In fact, VMDR leverages the significant engineering efforts we have been overtaking over the years to capture all the critical telemetry elements. From our vulnerability scanning technology, performing now more than 3 billion scans annually, from our cloud agent technology, with more than 30 million cloud agents deployed across on-premises, endpoint, cloud, mobile, containers, and OT and IoT environment. And finally, from our passive sensors that identify in real time any device that connects to the network while analyzing the network traffic. It is by bringing all of that telemetry into a state-of-the-art cloud-based backend, which is now containerized and microservices-based, comprised of more than 140 open source engines, where we're indexing of the 3 trillion data points on our Elasticsearch clusters, moving more than 5 billion messages a day on our Kafka bus, performing 1 million writes per second onto Cassandra, and much more. This allows us to normalize, correlate, and enrich the data we collect in real time while providing integrated workflow and response capabilities. This is why we're able to bring VMDR to market at scale, handling now more than 9 petabytes of data on our distributed data lakes, providing 100 milliseconds response time. Now you can understand why we are so proud of showcasing VMDR today, so you can see it for yourself in the live demo that our Chief Product Officer and President, Sumedh Thakar, will give you in a few minutes. He will then share the additional and significant extensions he and his team are currently working on. He will update you on our recently launched 60 days free remote endpoint protection offering, and then we'll moderate a panel with VMDR early adopters. Finally, Sumedh and I will answer questions from the audience. We are recording VMDR live and will make the transcript available on our website shortly. Before introducing Sumedh, let me add that VMDR is far more than the next level in vulnerability management. It is in fact the foundation for the expansion of our cloud platform to provide the next generation EDR and incident response capabilities, which we will soon bring to market. Now, Sumedh.
Thank you, Philippe, and hello everyone. Welcome to VMDR Live. So VMDR is live, very exciting. As Philippe mentioned earlier, a lot of hard work by our engineers, our operations team, product team, really going into making this solution happen in difficult times, as all of you are going through as well, working from home, and a lot of excitement in the teams to get feedback on this new game-changing approach towards vulnerability management. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the solution and then give a live demo. And as I mentioned, really excited to get feedback because this is a whole new approach towards vulnerability management. Effective vulnerability management, as you all know, really is made up of these 4 components: asset inventory being the first one, vulnerability assessment, prioritization, and patch management. And really at the end starts with effective asset inventory program. So being able to discover all assets that are on the environment in real time. Obviously, we know CMDBs are not working well at all because of the manual nature. So there needs to be a system that is continuously assessing and monitoring the network and bringing all of that information, not just the hardware, but also the software asset inventory. After that, you need to be able to look at all of the vulnerabilities and configuration issues on these devices in a continuous manner, right? It's not a one-time, just a scan-based solution, which is done on a periodic basis, as has been done in the past, is not effective. There needs to be an approach where there can be a continuous assessment of the entire environment, especially in hybrid environment, not just your servers. Vulnerability management has expanded quite a bit across the infrastructure, whether it's cloud, containers, ICS devices, all kinds of different types of devices connecting to the network. So that ability to continuously have a visibility on the vulnerability and configuration posture is an important cornerstone of an effective vulnerability management program. After that, today, given the huge amount of vulnerabilities that are being detected, when you have this continuous approach, there obviously has to be a very threat and risk-oriented approach towards prioritizing the vulnerabilities which you want to put your efforts first. And that has to be done with the context of the threat that those vulnerabilities pose. As we all know, not all vulnerabilities pose threats. Also, the ability to bring the threat factor of that vulnerability along with the asset context. So a lot of times just saying that this vulnerability by itself is a high criticality vulnerability is not enough if you don't have the context of the asset to prioritize it, right? So of course you want to fix all vulnerabilities, but how do you prioritize the one? So bringing that asset context and correlating that is really important. And then, of course, all of this is of not much value if you cannot really do the patching and the response capabilities effectively. And today, in most organizations, all of these are managed with different tools. The four things that I've highlighted here, there are completely different tools. A lot of time, different teams are involved, and a lot of time is spent in just trying to get these tools to talk to each other to be effective, and going from discovering a brand new asset to assessing its vulnerabilities, configs, looking at its threats, prioritizing and actually patching it. And because of the way these tools are completely independent and the way they work with each other, there's a lot of time today that is spent in trying to fix those vulnerabilities. And that's the time that, of course, those devices are exposed with those vulnerabilities to a risk. And so mitigating at that and bringing down the time it takes to remediate is very important. And it's really highlighted very well with this WannaCry example, where you had the CVE for that particular vulnerability came out in March. This was just recently, in 2017, I think. And you can see this curve that after the CVE came out, our customers, and this is data that we have put together, looking at the patterns that we see from a patching perspective and from a vulnerability detection perspective. Those customers, so the initial check was an authenticated check. Those customers who were doing authenticator scanning, we saw a big spike in the detections, and then some people had good programs, so they were patching it slowly and you can see that curve sort of dip when people went into the regular patching workflow. In about a month, you had Eternal Blue exploit that came out. So now there was an exploit for this particular vulnerability. And then our engineers were able to reverse engineer it and create a remote detection. As soon as we had a remote detection, there was a big spike in the number of detections. Just to again highlight that there are still a lot of organizations out there that are not doing authenticated checks and continuous checks with agents, and so the detection rate went up, but then you can see the remediation still sort of stayed flat because people were not prioritizing their vulnerabilities properly, and that led to a good amount of time. About another month went by, and after that, when WannaCry hit, which was weaponizing that exploit to actually cause damage, that's when everybody got into the emergency patching phase and really tried hard to bring those numbers down. As you can see here, very quickly those numbers started to go down significantly, but which meant that because of the lack of proper highlighting and prioritization of that vulnerability, there was while of course when the vulnerability came out, patching would have been a lot effective, but because a lot of organizations did not have the tools to highlight the fact that now there was an exploit for a particular vulnerability, which makes it higher priority. You can see that there was a good amount of time which was lost in that time to remediate, to be able to do a good job at remediation. And so these different tools working well with each other, prioritizing things is very important, and it really needs an approach where you collect a lot of the information, bring it to the platform, correlate it, and then be able to crunch all of the information that is out on the asset, the vulnerability, to come up with something that effectively reduces this time to remediate. And that's precisely where we are excited about our recent launch of VMDR, which is something that brings that asset inventory, vulnerability management, threat prioritization, and the response capability into one single app, focusing on a true risk-based approach and not just an approach of basically taking a broad sweep for everything. And this is really combining, Qualys VMDR really combines the ability to do a precise job at looking at all of the inventory, discovering all of the assets, whether they are managed or unmanaged, organizing them. This is a very important part. just having the asset information is not good enough if you cannot attribute to certain assets owners, certain applications. And so our dynamic rule-based tagging that is included as part of VMDR does a job of using rules that can be created to automatically keep these assets organized by tagging them as information is coming in and changing on them. Of course, with the agents, there is the ability to do a continuous assessment of vulnerabilities and configurations. So you're not just reliant on scan-based approach, which is a periodic approach. So that is included as part of VMDR. And also in that workflow, we have added the ability to look at threats, prioritize those threats with a new context engine, which is taking the threat of the vulnerability itself, the asset priority, criticality, and the various elements on the asset, which is the attack surface of that asset, to be able to come up with something that is very unique in the way that it's being done, because we are bringing so many different pieces of information together. And then the last part that VMDR really brings is precisely identifying what remediation action needs to be taken and what patches need to be deployed. And then, of course, you can expand that by leveraging the Qualys agents to also deploy those exact specific patches. VMDR also comes with a very interesting capability, which is a threat feed and some very unique classification of threats that help provide organizations with the ability to do analysis of threats according to their environment. So as I've listed here, there are many different types of real-time threat indicators that are now included with VMDR, where we can highlight vulnerabilities that are denial of service, and those may only be important if it is a external facing asset versus an internal facing asset. You have things like 0 days public exploit, so anything that's a public exploit, easily exploitable, something that has dark web chatter but not yet exploitable. So all of these different elements are now brought together as part of an integrated threat feed, and is completely integrated to the VMDR workflow in the different aspects of dashboard and reporting. And also one of the things we include here is the machine learning prediction. Again, this is not a end-all be-all capability here that some of the other providers are talking about machine learning as the solution for everything. It is one of the indicators, threat indicators, that needs to be taken into account when prioritizing vulnerabilities. The other important aspect, which again is very unique that we are bringing, is the asset context and looking at the attack surface. So it's not just enough to say that there is a vulnerability on an asset and that vulnerability is exploitable. It's also important to look at the individual asset to say, is that vulnerability on the running kernel? Is it on the running service? So you may have a vulnerability, but the service is not running. That obviously changes the equation in terms of the risk. There are vulnerabilities that could already be mitigated by configuration settings on the device, so they don't need to be prioritized higher. A database, as an example, will be a much higher priority to fix if it's an internet-facing database. Many other things, like just the age of the scan, as an example, is how long has that vulnerability been detected on that specific asset, because, of course, from a statistical probability perspective, if something is out there for longer, it's going to get as a higher probability that it will get exploited than something that just was discovered or came onto the asset just a day or so ago. Patch management as part of the VMDR solution is very, very exciting, because it really cuts down on the time that it takes to go from vulnerabilities to patches. I mean, all of you are today dealing with this, where giving a threat or a prioritized report, even after doing the prioritization to the IT teams, trying to figure out how a vulnerability maps to a precise patch is something that is extremely difficult to do. And that is something that with VMDR we are simplifying significantly by bringing a solution that does not only OS patches but also does third-party patches. It leverages the correlation of vulnerabilities to specific patches, which I'll talk about a little bit. And then, being a completely 100% cloud-based approach, the patch deployment can happen directly from the CDNs of the vendors without requiring to go through VPN as traditional enterprise solutions require that to be done through on-prem solutions that have VPNs. And today, of course, with the remote workforce, you can see that that's not a option anymore, because you just cannot have hundreds of gigabytes of patches going through the VPN. So there's a lot of additional advantages that the VMDR patch management capability brings into play. Another aspect of VMDR is the superseding patches that are built in. That information about the superseding patches is really important, because as you can see some of the examples here, you had the Google Chrome patch that came out, which essentially supersedes like 28 different Chrome versions from 2019 alone, covering 177 vulnerabilities. And you can see the other example here of Internet Explorer, very similar. And the traditional vulnerability management, the way if you look at each vulnerability and then try to look for the patch, they end up being hundreds of patches, if not more, that have to be deployed individually. But that correlation of being able to take the information about the vulnerability, the patch, and the supersedence is something that now is built directly into VMDR, which really saves a lot of time when trying to figure out precisely what patch needs to be deployed there. Another aspect here is the patch identification. So being able to automatically identify the patch. So a lot of times, even if you actually know what patch needs to be deployed. So in this case, we had the .NET patch that was released in January 2020, which fixed 3 CVEs. But if you look at based on the combination of the operating system and the version of .NET that is deployed, the architecture of the system and all of that, it was a 64-bit, 32-bit, the language of the particular version of the operating system, there's like 34 different KBs that are required to be deployed to fix that one particular patch, as an example. So IT administrators really spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to take the information about the vulnerability. So it's easy to say, okay, go fix this vulnerability, but how do you translate that into the actual patch that needs to be deployed on the individual machine? And as part of VMDR, that precise assessment with our agent is something that is another unique piece of VMDR, where we actually go and look at each and every individual asset to know exactly which file needs to be deployed on that. And that really ends up saving a lot of time in getting to the remediation aspect of the entire process. Another thing that's very unique with VMDR is the ability to have a very simple asset-based model. So now we have really simplified this model. We have included with the simple asset-based license, we have included unlimited number of virtual scanners, agents, passive scanning. So how you assess the vulnerability, you can leverage many different ways to find and discover all the various vulnerabilities. We include a plethora of different types of inventory capabilities that cover everything from cloud, container, mobile devices. Categorization, normalization is included part of this simple asset-based model. Configuration assessment against CIS benchmarks, which is very important. A lot of times, just because a patch is deployed does not mean that the asset is not exploitable or vulnerable. Continuous monitoring so that you can be proactive. That's included as part of the simple asset-based pricing as well. And then the last part is also very important, which is the CI/CD integration is included in VMDR, which is not just the ability to detect vulnerabilities in your runtime, but also how to leverage Jenkins plugins and others to make this as part of your pipeline. Today with DevOps driving a lot of the process, how can you leverage VMDR to reduce the number of vulnerabilities that are seen at runtime? This is something that is also included as part of VMDR, which is available now. So enough talk. Now it's time for a demo, and I'm going to go through a few different examples to give you a quick overview of the power of VMDR end-to-end, all the way from asset discovery to the ability to deploy the patches as well. So let's switch over to the demo. So here you can see the brand new UI that we are rolling out for everybody who's upgrading to VMDR. And as I mentioned earlier, the 4 pillars of effective vulnerability management program, which is identifying assets, discovering vulnerabilities, prioritizing your threats, and deploying the patches. So this UI uniquely brings all of that together in a single workflow, in a single app. And there's a nice little video in that circle that you can see to get an idea of how the whole thing works end to end, but it's pretty easy workflows. Of course, as I mentioned, part of VMDR, the first aspect is identifying all of your assets and being able to do that with multiple different ways. At the bottom, there's scanners, passive scanners, so many additional ways to get your inventory. But we can start off by giving a demo of how easy it is to leverage the Qualys Cloud Agent, because it brings a lot of rich inventory information from the devices in real time, especially now with remote endpoints being everywhere, and provide that unique visibility. So let me see if I can zoom this thing a little bit. And I highly recommend that if you can do that in your browser, yeah, there you go. So if you can do that in your browser to make it full screen, you definitely should do that. So here you can see a little bit better the UI. You can start off by clicking download Cloud Agent. Unlimited Cloud Agents are included for inventory for free. Let's take an example of Windows. Very easy, simple, lightweight 3 megabyte agent that you can download and essentially distribute this with a very simple command line argument. There's a few ways you can do that. We have customers who are using existing solutions for deployment of software, cloud-based solutions like Intune, and a few others. So we have a blog out there that explains many different ways to get the agent installed. Once it's installed, the good thing is that it auto-updates, it keeps itself updated, and you never really have to go and update the agent again. So it's a completely self-updating and self-managed agent. And if you want to take a look at it, there's also the other section on Azure Security Center agent, which is built in. So that's another aspect of the agent installation. But let's focus on the Windows one. So once you get those agents installed, you will be able to come back here and it'll start populating your dashboard, which I'm going to show. That dashboard essentially brings together all of the various elements of asset inventory throughout your entire enterprise in one single view. So it starts off with a distribution of all of your operating systems, gives a category breakdown of cloud assets, network devices, laptops, printers, any of your IoT type devices, desktops. So everything is brought together in a single view. You can see the complete distribution, categorization. So as I mentioned earlier too, the big part of what we do, our inventory, is not just collect raw information and show that. We highly normalize and categorize that information, which is why today when you look at the remote endpoints as an example, you can quickly see here all of your client hardware and all of your client operating systems. So what kind of actual laptops are out there across the entire remote workforce. As an example, you can see that across different models, how many assets do you have. Operating systems the same way, Windows 10, do you have any outdated Windows 7 as you have in this case? Are all of your Mac agents updated to Catalina or Mac devices updated to the latest version as well? If you scroll down here, you can see all of your remote endpoints on a map, because being a cloud-based solution, we can keep track of where these devices are and show them in near real time. Before I go there, another interesting thing here is today you see there's a lot of software out there that is malware, rather I should say, out there that is targeting VPN vulnerabilities. And so the inventory that we have brings together all of the VPN endpoints that are installed inside the network that are being targeted or that have vulnerabilities. So you can very quickly get the full inventory of those as well. Now let's go on to the remote endpoints here. If you go over the map, you'll see the distribution of all the devices that you have in the different locations, different cities out there. We have a few in Paris. There's a big operation in Pune, so there's quite a few over there out in India. We could have one salesperson out in Japan, so there's that one single device out in Tokyo as an example, that you can keep track of where that device is and where it's connecting from. It's interesting, I see a device out here in Rio. Not sure if one of our employees is out there in during the lockdown, or maybe it's a stolen laptop that's popped up in Rio. You can easily drill down further and investigate that. Furthermore, if you look at some of the client application categories, there's more detail out there in terms of productivity software, collaboration software, databases, end of life. You can track your overall security hygiene. The collaboration software, that part is quite interesting because that includes a lot of your licenses that are being used for everything from Word to PowerPoint to even collaboration includes all of your video conferencing software as an example. So let me scroll up here and then see if I can click on the notebooks. So there's about 1,200 or so notebooks. Clicking on that will give the latest notebooks that are connecting, where they are, what's on those notebooks. We categorize very quickly on our own, provide information about the operating system, so you can see the Windows versus the Macs. But the really cool part of how all of this gets connected in a single workflow is the ability to then take these queries, the QQL queries that are part of our Elasticsearch, which I mentioned earlier, that's indexing the 3 trillion data points. You can take that and create a tag out of it, so you can use it later during your report. So in this case, I'm creating a simple remote endpoints tag based on anything that's a computer, and the category is notebook. So that way I can track all of them throughout the entire workflow. Once you've done that, you can switch over to the software. So this is one thing I mentioned earlier, that our agent really brings a lot of rich telemetry information about installed software, and then we use the normalization categorization on our backend to explain exactly which of the software is security software, which is application content, what is productivity, and then look at all the vendors as an example. So being able to ensure that we can see across the vendor the different type of software out there. Can quickly come in here and categorize them. So here I'm categorizing that. And with that, I can see that out of the 46,000 plus software, there's collaboration and web conferencing, right? So as I mentioned earlier, collaboration category has different types of subcategories, and one of the categorization here is web conferencing. So for 1,200 laptops, there's 3,400 web conferencing software installed across those laptops, which is very interesting information. And from a breakdown perspective, there's about 1,100 of them are BlueJeans, there's Cisco WebEx, and as you know today, there's a lot of talk about the vulnerabilities that were discovered in some of the Zoom video conferencing software. So in this case, there's 187 Zoom video conferencing apps installed across those laptops. Clicking on that will bring us to a list of all of the various versions and how many devices out of those 187 are at the different versions. So I believe the 4.6.8 and below were the ones that were vulnerable. So in this example, you can see that a majority of the apps have been updated to the latest version, so that makes it a lot more secure. Again, I'm going to create a tag here so that we can use that later during the workflow. So here we're creating a tag called Zoom endpoints, and here you can see the simple query that again, as you notice that the query was created by just clicking through, and I didn't even have to type through for that query. That's how intuitive that UI is. So once you create the tag, then you can track it and use that tag later. So now let's go switch to the vulnerability workflow. So this is where I had mentioned going into the VMDR workflow. This is one of the new cool things we are releasing with VMDR, is completely customizable and unlimited dashboarding and ability to create real-time live widgets with trending information built in. So here, as part of the new VMDR interface, this is something that we're rolling out to pretty much all customers, even though you are not a VMDR customer. This specific dashboarding capability will be pushed out to everybody over the next few weeks, because it really changes how you track your vulnerabilities and how you do vulnerability management directly out of the box. So this default dashboard that we have built shows all the open vulnerabilities, fixed vulnerabilities, your enabled, disabled, rather ignored and disabled vulnerabilities, tracking the agents. You'll see a lot more discussion that we do about the age of these vulnerabilities. So we can, look at the age of these detections, how long ago were a lot of these vulnerabilities detected. The favorite things that people like to do, your top 10 vulnerabilities, your top 10 hosts, which tags those hosts belong to, being able to drill down and find out which host has the most number of vulnerabilities. It's all extremely customizable and very easy to build multiple widgets on a dashboard. I'm actually going to show you with an example. So if I go here, let me pick a name for this and let me create the query. So it's a very simple query. Essentially anything that is a vulnerability that is found in the last 30 days and has a CVSS base score between 7 and 10. And the first time that it was ever found was in the last 30 days. So this excludes vulnerabilities that were found a long time ago and maybe have been opened or reopened or whatever it is. So very granular ability to create these widgets. And as you saw, immediately it shows up with the count. I can check a box, and this is one of my favorite features. You don't have to pull the data out into some other Tableau or some other places like Splunk or any other SIM solutions to try to do trending on this information. That is automatically now built in as part of this new interface. You can go in here, just check the box and then say add to dashboard, and that widget will now be on the dashboard in a matter of seconds. So now when you scroll down here, let me scroll down here, and there you go, you see the widget right there. So going back up, I'm going to show another example which is a little bit more in depth, but another example of creating a widget by using the example of the CVE, which was the crypto API, Microsoft crypto API vulnerability that came out, I think, last month, where it was one of the really key vulnerabilities that needed to be highly prioritized, and everybody wanted to keep track of the burn down of how quickly they were patching that particular vulnerability. So by being able to create that widget very easily. And another thing I wanted to mention, if you look here at the top, you can actually view the information, change the widget types as a pie chart or as a table or a bar chart very quickly just by clicking through those options. I'm going to focus right now on a number widget. The cool thing here is that you can basically create very easy ways to draw attention for those who are tracking these different types of tracking widgets. You can really click on each one of those and then be able to find out the detailed information. But then if you have a lot of widgets on a dashboard, how do you find out which ones are the ones that need your attention? So you can very easily come in here and then create very simple rules that say, maybe in the case that the number of endpoints in my environment is greater than a certain value. So in this case, I'm going to take the value of 10. So if the number of devices that have that is over 10, then it needs to turn yellow. Now, if I say that the number of devices goes beyond the 10, and I can take another example here. So let's take the value here of saying that now if the number of devices, as we are tracking, the widgets are getting updated. So let's say 25 is a number, then it becomes orange. And you can go and add additional colors to get information, and then you can track the historic trending directly out of the box. And that's how easy it is. I could easily add another one here in different colors, but because these widgets are live, they're continuously tracking the values, and as soon as those values change, you can see the color change and draw your attention. And then we're adding additional capabilities soon to be able to do alerting based on these thresholds as well. So I added that widget here, so you can see the crypto API widget is added as well. Once you've done that, the next thing here is really looking at the third aspect of it. Is you have a way now to detect vulnerabilities in real time, and a way to keep track of those vulnerabilities by using these dashboards and widgets. But then the next aspect of this is really going to be about tracking threats. So one of the things that VMDR brings as part of this workflow is the ability to have a live feed of the latest threats that are impacting your organization. And that's the key term here, your organization. So as our threat researchers are doing research and adding different types of threats as part of that feed, the big aspect that is unique here is the ability for the platform to go in and immediately, as soon as this threat is pushed out, is to go and detect how many exact assets in your environment are impacted by that. So sometimes there could be a feed that has no assets that are impacted in your environment. In other cases, you can see on the left on the high feed here that there's the Mac OS, there's the Firefox vulnerability here. You can look at the Zoom vulnerability. So the UNC path injection vulnerability, and I will talk about that later. Now, you want to fix what's on the left hand side first, because that's exploitable, and we talked about the real-time threat indicators, which I'll showcase a little bit later as well in addition to this. But once all of that is done, you can also start looking at the next level of prioritization, which is, it's not maybe a easily exploitable vulnerability in the wild, but you know that when there is a POC exploit, and that's why we kind of put this as a medium one, where the fact that a vulnerability now has some sort of a POC available, which means that it's probably the next step is going to be some sort of an exploit is going to come out in the wild, maybe as part of an exploit kit or something. So very easy ways to keep track. And again, the focus is on showing what is impacted in your organization, so that instead of just saying that this is a critical vulnerability, you can really focus on saying, how does it impact? Now, the next thing after you've looked at, kept track of the threats, is how do you operationalize this information and the RTIs and the asset context. And this is the really big cool thing that we have added, is leveraging the platform updates we have done, is to create a prioritization workflow that very easily leverages the tags that we created earlier. As I mentioned, again, to reiterate, those tags are kept up to date automatically by the system. So if new assets come on board and those assets have those tags, have those attributes, those tags will automatically be updated. So I'm going to go through a few examples here. So first example that I'm going to go through here is pick one of those tags that we had created earlier. So in this case, I'm going to pick the tag that we had created, which is the remote endpoint tag. Once I click the tag, it's immediately going to go and fetch the information to say, as you see in this case, that there's 1.68K assets that are part of that tag, which and on all of those assets, there's 34,000 vulnerabilities detected, and you can see the CVSS breakdown. But then we start to bring all the relevant information about that, right? So what's the detection age? And you can select that from here, whether you want to only focus on vulnerabilities that were detected a certain number of days ago, or then you come in here, you can see the real-time threat indicators. So there's a lot of them. There's 0 days, and again, these are very focused. So there's different ways that we provide customers to customize this prioritization to their environment. So we do some analysis, and additionally, there are things that the customers can choose here. So there's high lateral movement, high data loss, denial of service, and things like that. And so, the point here is that a lot of times other solutions tend to have issues with figuring out how to prioritize, because denial of service doesn't really make sense to prioritize that on a remote endpoint, as an example. But an exploit kit vulnerability, that actually makes a lot of sense to prioritize on an endpoint, because remember, when you have these remote endpoints that are out there, as soon as that device is now connected to the internet at home, it's being used by the kids to download PDFs or whatever it is. Exploit kits that are out there are actually leveraging vulnerabilities, and we keep track of all of the vulnerabilities that are in all of these popular exploit kits. And those you want to mitigate first, because it's very easy to send someone, embed an exploit kit as part of a PDF or an Excel sheet or a video, send it to someone, they open it. If the vulnerability is there, then they can own the machine immediately, right? So focusing for remote endpoints on vulnerabilities with that are part of exploit kits gives a lot of granularity in picking what prioritization needs to be done. And then on the right hand side, you see all of the attack surface options. So we'll go a little bit more in depth through the rest of the demos, but here, again, because I talked so much, it took some time, but otherwise it's a very fast, within a couple seconds, we are going to go and do the full analysis to say, out of the 1600 assets that are part of the remote endpoints, the ones that have vulnerabilities that are used in exploit kits is, you can see here on the left hand side, only 24. So you really need to focus on only those 24 prioritized assets. And there are 27 unique vulnerabilities on those 24 assets that need to be patched. And of course, to patch those, we have done the translation. I talked about that earlier, from the vulnerability directly to the exact patch on the exact machine. So there's 10 patches that need to be deployed across 24 assets to fix those 27 unique vulnerabilities. And that's really the power of what VMDR is about. It brings you the very quick analysis, prioritize with very quick, easy customizations as needed, give you the list of all of those vulnerabilities. You can look at it in different ways. You can look at it as vulnerabilities. You can look at it as patches. You can look at it as assets. So in this case, if I click on patches, now I can see the same list, but from a patch perspective. And so I can say, oh, this Firefox patch needs to be deployed. I can go ahead and say patch that now. But in the simplest workflow here is without having to worry about the different operating systems and the different versions and the architectures or anything like that. The big part of the response capability here is to have that ability to directly click here and say, add this to a new job, or create a new job. It will take some defaults, create a new job here. You can edit some of these things if you want from the asset perspective or the actual patches that are going to be deployed. But now we pick the tag, we pick the 10 patches that need to be deployed across all of those devices. And then you just have to go hit save. And now that patch will start rolling out to all of those endpoints as soon as they are connected to the internet. So again, remember, no need to go through VPNs because we pull the patches directly from the CDN vendors, and it's a full capability patch module with everything from being able to provide messages for what they should see when it comes up for a reboot, as an example, or to be able to schedule, to be able to roll back patches. So as you explore that, you'll see that this is a full patch deployment capability that can really replace any of your entrenched patching modules as well. So once that is done here, let's go and take another example. So I will pick another tag. So let's take web services tag here, right? So web servers, I should say. Once you pick the tag, immediately it's going to go to do the same analysis, find the number of hosts that are impacted, find the total vulnerabilities that are impacted. So you will see here there are 75 assets that are impacted. You can see the age of the detections, and in this case, we're picking some RTIs like active attacks and vulnerable, because those are more concerning on your web servers, as an example. As soon as you prioritize, it's going to go and showcase, essentially bring the number of assets that are actually impacted. Now, if you see here, there are 75 total assets, and 68 of those, based on the default RTIs, need to be prioritized and patched. However, you can say now that in your environment, and because these are web servers, you care also about the denial of service threat indicators, so that we will go and figure out which of those now is actually increased to 73, because we also added denial of service. Now you can take off some of these and you can say, I don't care about vulnerable, and the number will go down. But the when you talk about the attack surface, remember I mentioned the attack surface is essentially a way to figure out the context of the asset and the vulnerability on them. So now, while there may be a lot of web servers and there are many different ways to detect vulnerabilities, you can detect it with agent, you can detect the vulnerability with scan, authenticated, unauthenticated scans. One of the things that you want to really prioritize here is to say, go to the attack surface and say, I only want to look at the remotely discoverable vulnerabilities, right? Which is vulnerabilities that are on my external facing web servers that don't need any authentication to detect them. Those are the highest priority. So now that goes down to 29. So these 29 assets are web servers that have vulnerabilities that can be remotely detected without authentication. And there are 4 patches available here that can be deployed. So there was a vulnerability that came out, I think that impacted Tomcat recently, called GhostCat. So here you can see very quickly that we can pick Tomcat on and we can patch Tomcat leveraging the Qualys agent if you have the agent on the machine already. So very easy to create a job. So I'm going to go here. In this case, I will say add this to an existing job. And all right, are the demo guards going to give up on me? Oh, that does not look good. Oh, it's coming back. Okay. All right, just so you know that it's real. We're still a couple things we need to focus and work out on this, but overall it's working really well. Let's take another example. So let me clear out the web servers and let's pick another tag that I had created earlier. So in this case, I'm going to say it's a data center asset. So it's not just web servers, there's a data center, and we pick the tag, and there are many assets in there. There may be routers, switches, databases, all kinds of different things, web servers. So you have San Diego data center. Okay, let me see. Oh, here, there you go. So now it's going to go and figure out that there's 242 assets in that. In this case, I actually care about the high data loss type of threat indicators, right? So now I can go and say, let me click and say, include all of the vulnerabilities that are known to be related to high data loss. And so now the prioritized assets is 56 out of the 242. So there's a 56 assets that need to be focused on, 94 unique vulnerabilities that can be fixed with 23 patches. Now, how do you look at the attack surface and narrow this down even further to say what is the first batch of things that you need to focus on? So one of the things we bring as part of VMDR now is the ability to know which of the vulnerabilities that are detected and the threats that are out there actually are unauthenticated exploits. So we talked about discovering vulnerabilities, but just because you remotely discover a vulnerability doesn't mean that it can be exploited remotely. Some of the vulnerabilities do require you to be on the box for exploitation. So now I can very quickly flip that and say, okay, I only want to focus on the ones that can be remotely exploited without authentication. So that brings that number down to 45 assets that need to be focused on. I can go further to say, once that exploitation has happened, which vulnerabilities actually lead to elevated privilege escalation. So different exploits do different things. So just because a vulnerability gets exploited may not necessarily always mean that there's a direct path to a privilege escalation. Here, because we bring that attack surface and we bring that additional information on the specific assets, now we can say, look at things like, show me only vulnerabilities that are on the running kernel, or only the ones that are on a running service. Don't show me things that are not on the running service or not on the running kernel, right? You find a vulnerability, it's on a kernel that's actually on the disk, not loaded in memory. That's not a high priority thing that you need to fix. Even if it was an exploitable vulnerability, that's not your first order. Here, anything that is unauthenticated exploitation, and if the exploitation leads to high privilege escalation, that's the list that you want to focus on. So now that's down to 44 hosts that need 13 vulnerabilities to be fixed with 2 patches that can be deployed. So again, pretty easily you can go and add that tag. I think we need to work on this messaging here. It needs to give a confirmation message when I click add, but we'll work on that. So next one I'm taking is an example of a database server. So here I pick database server, go click prioritize now. Here it's a very simple use case that I'm looking at, right? There's 219 database servers across the environment, and that's fine. There's databases are used for many different things, and 212 of those really need focus on them. But what I really care about is any database that is has a vulnerability or is known to be associated with malware, or current active attacks are going on against that particular vulnerability on that asset. But then I want to focus to say the first order is, what is the worst thing that can happen is a database that has one of these threat indicators is actually internet facing. So just by flipping that, because we bring the asset context, you can very quickly say, now that narrows down to 24 assets that have databases that are that have vulnerabilities that are remotely facing to the internet, and those absolutely need to be patched first. So here's another example of how you can leverage that ability to create those patches and push those patches out. Again, end to end, going from the asset identification through the tags, detection of the vulnerabilities, prioritization, leveraging the RTIs, and then the response, leveraging the patching capability, all brought together in a single workflow. So here, I can add this to an existing job. So, all right, so I go back to where we started again. So this is the last example I want to show, because this is again highlights what I mentioned earlier, that it's not just about the vulnerabilities, it's also about configurations and configuration related issues that cause, let me see the endpoints. Yeah, that's the Zoom endpoints that I picked earlier. So with that, now I can focus on things that maybe you cannot patch very easily, or patches are available but cannot be patched in the normal way. Zoom has an interesting way that they patch the vulnerability. So, and they did a fantastic job of very quickly coming out with a patch so that you could deploy, or because they have the apps, they can auto update the patching. So here in this case, when I hit prioritize now on my Zoom endpoints, here I'm selecting a different set of threat indicators that I care about, right? And so those are the you have the UNC injection vulnerability that came out, and they patched it very quickly. One of the ways that they have been patching this is that when you join the meeting, and after that meeting has finished, and you quit the meeting, at that time they show that there is a patch, and they ask you to patch now, and they do patch that. But that does leave a certain amount of time when those devices are vulnerable, because if someone sends you something to click on, and that can then leverage the vulnerability to actually try and exploit that vulnerability to get the information about the hash, and you can read up more information about that. But what happens in that case is that now you are still vulnerable, and the patch is being rolled out, but it's being rolled out in a manner that after you have finished the meeting, it will show up for the end users. In that case, there are other ways, and this is just one example, but many times, you have the 7 monkeys vulnerabilities, where you can mitigate that vulnerability with network level authentication, enabling a configuration option, which then mitigates the vulnerability. So a lot of times what happens is that just because the vulnerability detected by the scanner does not mean that the device is vulnerable, because the vulnerability can be mitigated by a configuration change on the box that has been done, that's in place. So if the configuration is in place, then you don't really prioritize that vulnerability. So one of the additional attack surface options we provide here is the ability to say, only show me the vulnerabilities that are not mitigated by configuration. So which means the vulnerability is detected by the agent or the scanner, but it has not been mitigated by a configuration change. So in the case of the 7 monkeys vulnerability, if the network level authentication was enabled, we would consider that the vulnerability is mitigated because of the configuration change. So in that case, we would not highlight that as a high priority vulnerability. So in the case of Zoom, is the same with NTLM, right? So you can basically go and check that, and so now it's going to show you only the vulnerabilities that are not mitigated by a configuration change. And so in this case, it's going to show you the configuration change that is needed. So it's not just about patching, but also if there are other ways that you can mitigate that vulnerability. So in this case, essentially, it's option to say that you can actually restrict NTLM from going to remote servers, right? If you don't have that device allowing NTLM traffic to a remote server, then you are much better protected because you're potentially not leaking your NTLM hash in that case because it cannot go to a remote server. So that simple turning on that capability. So this is something that is in the works right now, is that extending that ability to take response action, going beyond applying patches, but also to create jobs leveraging the agent to fix misconfigurations on the box. So here you can create the job, pick the assets, and then you have the controls, and then you can go and say apply that particular fix, and now you can that job is going to go and execute and is going to work on changing the configuration. So while the patch has not yet been deployed, you are still better off from a true risk perspective. And that's what it comes down to, right? Everything that I have shown here is a risk-based approach towards vulnerability management. It's not just saying I use some machine learning, and that's one of the RTIs here, which is a machine learning predicted high vulnerability, which is just one of the RTIs, right? So we leverage machine learning in the right place to be able to say that this particular thing is something that can, based on machine learning, is highlighted as a vulnerability that can potentially become deadly in the future. But again, you want to focus on fixing what right now is actually exploitable, and then go to the machine learning aspect of it. So again, that flexibility, bringing that risk-based approach to really look at in your environment, and also within your environment, as I showed, different tags have different risk factors, and different RTIs are important to them, and different attack surface options are important based on your assets. So very flexible, very fast, backed by that super fast Elasticsearch database. We're able to really create different prioritization reports very quickly. And in the top, you will see that there is, on the top right, there is the ability to export these to a dashboard. So we have created a new type of widget, which is the VMDR tracking widget. So because yes, you have your report and you create the job, but how do you track that particular the report that you just ran in a live manner? So again, leveraging the dashboard engine that we've created, we are now taking that and we have put this new widgets which tracks the progress of that particular example, those examples that I took. So you can see the burn down directly without having to pull this data out and track it somewhere else. So this is another big part of VMDR, which is end-to-end, starting with asset discovery, inventory, vulnerability management in continuous mode, threat feed, threat detection, and then ability to create customizable prioritizations that are very based on actual risk factors and very customizable. I think I said customizable, so I'm repeating that because it is very customizable. And that really gives you now this unique workflow. So very excited, this rolled out already, and we've enabled a bunch of our customers. We're getting a lot of good feedback on this, and really I hope you like the demo, and really looking forward to getting feedback. So as you saw, there were a lot of things that we were able to showcase in the demo. The good news is that as we are rolling out VMDR, we are also rolling out a lot of the components of VMDR as an experience of UI to our existing customers as well, who are non-VMDR customers, so that they can get some of the advantages that are being rolled out. And this is again because we are a SaaS-based platform, I think this is something that really provides that unique ability for us to give a lot of the dashboards and some of the sensors and all of that included as part of that solution. And then of course from that you can upgrade to actually full VMDR version. So this will be rolled out over the next few weeks to all of our customers. What's next? So we continue to expand on the platform beyond VMDR by bringing in ICS and OT environment information. Also, we are now in beta for a SaaS security compliance solution so that we can cover additional types of assets as part of that VMDR platform, and expanding that to not just be for specific devices and remote endpoints, but also additional devices are being brought into that particular platform. And then, as we saw with VMDR, which is focused on vulnerabilities, we are also expanding the platform to bring in a lot more additional capabilities. We are very excited that soon we will be launching our response service around malware detection as well. So our EDR solution will be coming up pretty soon, which now will consolidate your vulnerability management platform and your EDR platforms into a single platform. So you can not only do the prevention work, which is detecting, prioritizing, and fixing those vulnerabilities that are being used by the malware, but then also to figure out with the same solution if any of those devices are still getting infected by malware through which may be coming through phishing and other areas as well. Cloud, which has been very big part of our platform. So we've had a very strong detection capability. So now we are also bringing the capability to take response actions on your cloud assets, whether your S3 buckets need to be fixed, your IAM roles need to be fixed. That's going to be cohesive part of the detection and response capabilities around cloud. Containers, we have been providing a way to look at the containers right from the CI/CD pipeline and at runtime as well. And now with the response capability, which is in beta, today we are also able to effectively block threats in real time that may be affecting your containers. So you can have a policy-based approach towards protecting those containers at runtime as well, and have an immediate response capability through that as well. Mobile device detection, as you saw earlier in the slide, the ability to detect mobile devices, the inventory, as well as the vulnerabilities is being rolled out right now. And then soon we will also have the ability to take response actions on your Android, iOS, enterprise Android, iOS devices and the tablets that are being used to be able to manage corporate devices that have corporate data, even though they are on the mobile operating systems as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the SaaS security will also get a response capability so that your O365, your G Suite, you can really look at that and take response actions to be able to have policy-based approach towards ensuring that your accounts are being kept in your security posture and within the compliance umbrella by automatically taking the action as needed, so that the manual effort that goes into trying to combine these different tools is something that can be eliminated by leveraging these detection response capabilities all built on the same platform. Which brings to the last part, which is what we mentioned earlier at QSC in San Francisco as well, is now with so many different types of data coming into the platform and the ability for us to correlate and take response actions makes it very natural for us to expand the platform into being able to do security analytics and correlation directly on our platform. So we are enhancing the platform even more, bringing additional capability, bringing the ability to have a wider set of databases to make it a bigger data lake, so to say, so that we can take all these signals that are coming into the platform already with the different detection response capabilities, where Qualys is already built in. We will inject logs and import logs from some of the other sources where we don't offer solutions like firewalls, and then be able to do analytics on top of that directly, so that you don't have to take a large amount of information from the Qualys platform across these different modules and try to do a lot of the cooking yourselves in your SIEM solutions. In a response for the current COVID-19 situation, Qualys launched about 10 days ago the ability to provide a 60-day free remote endpoint protection service for all of our existing customers and for any organizations that need badly to be able to keep an eye on the remote endpoints. This is some completely changed the landscape in the last few weeks, I would say, given that everybody is working from home, and a cloud-based solution like Qualys really provides that ability to keep an eye on all of the remote endpoints out there, no matter where they are, because of the cloud-based capability. Today, we provide this capability not only for vulnerability management, but also looking at security hygiene, something that's available for Windows already. We are working on a Mac version. You have the URL here. This is going really well. We are seeing a lot of customers are adopting this right now. Agents are being rolled out, and this is bringing some really quick, immediate value. So people can start working on deploying this without having to worry about how to get this procured and all of that, right? So sign up will enable this, so you can really start to focus on your endpoint, and that leverages all the components that a lot of the components, I should say, that VMDR are included as part of VMDR, and so the 60-day service is being rolled into the VMDR and the VMDR Experience UI, as I mentioned earlier as well. One of the exciting things that we are doing, again, because of the ability for our platform to scale without any additional installation of anything, we are working on expanding that remote service to be able to also detect malware on the same system. So without deploying any new agent or any new infrastructure or backend or anything like that, starting early May, we will also roll out the ability to figure out if any of these machines that are remote also are being infected by malware. And so that should help additionally for security teams to prioritize their efforts on which assets may be posing a risk to their environment. All of this is possible today because of our cloud-based platform and the architecture, which is extremely simple. You have the sensors that are collecting a large amount of information, sending it to the backend, very powerful backend that we have built that is able to analyze and assess this information, correlate this against threats, against asset. With all of this requires a lot of crunching that has to be done. And today, of course, we have done a lot of the hard work. Our engineering team has completely gone through our own digital transformation of the platform. So with that, we are able to index trillions of data points in Elasticsearch. We're doing billions of messages in Kafka. And that's why, as you saw in the demo, we are able to bring that type of speed and agility to figuring out what are the threats in the environment, even though we are crunching through a huge number of data points here. So with that, thank you very much for taking the time and attending this. I hope that you enjoyed the talk and the demo, and we're excited to see you use the solution and to give us feedback so that we can ensure that we continue to innovate as we have done with this game-changing VMDR solution as well. And so now we are going to, you heard a lot from me about what we are doing in Qualys, but of course we want to bring in a customer perspective. So now we're going to switch over to the other segment where we now talk to customers to hear what they feel and what they have to say about the concept of VMDR and how this can help them in their specific organizations. You saw in the demo and the presentation today, I talked a lot about VMDR. Obviously, we're very excited about VMDR. What I wanted to do also is to get a customer perspective now. We've set out to address a certain challenges with VMDR, and it will be very interesting to hear how customers actually are looking forward to some of the capabilities that VMDR brings them and what kind of challenges does that solve for them. So joining us today is Daryl Peterson. He is at ATN International, and he's joining us from Atlanta. He has been an early adopter of Qualys and has given us a lot of feedback over the years and has helped us build some very cool solutions. So we're looking forward to getting his feedback. So welcome, Daryl, and will be great if we can start off by giving an introduction and about yourself and the company, and then we can go from there.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Daryl Peterson. I work for ATN International as the facility manager. I've been in that position from January. Before that, I was with the company on the server administration side. I personally have been using Qualys for over a year now, like server administration, and also with my new position, For those that don't know about ATN International, we are a telecommunications company located in the continental U.S., but we also have subsidiaries within the Caribbean and South America.
All right, thank you. So, welcome again, and let's get started to really hear your views on the different aspects of challenges that you face with vulnerability management. But before that, I wanted to make sure that we kick off this segment by first addressing the current situation from a security perspective. So hopefully you are doing well and everybody you know is doing well. But this has really changed quite a bit what our priorities were in security maybe even a month ago. And so from that perspective, I'm curious how the current remote situation, work from home situation has really changed the way you are approaching security and how your team is addressing that with the change situation as well.
Well, some of the biggest challenges from a security aspect right now is making sure that you can secure your endpoint. As we have a lot more users now working from home, as you mentioned, you know, they're not coming on-prem, they're not coming on premises. So, one of the challenges we're having VPN connections and making sure that users can connect to everything that they need to be able to connect to as if they were working on premises.
Yeah, that's the top of everyone's mind today, right? To see how VPNs are going to address the challenge that we have. And you probably need a different approach for that. But before we go there, right, I wanted to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, right? So today there's teams are trying to figure this out with a lot of different tools and different processes are involved in the overall detecting your devices, discovering inventory, vulnerability management, prioritization, and patching. So how are you today with all these different tools? How are you looking at this challenge and what's on top of your mind?
One of the biggest challenges that my team face is securing our workstations off premises. Um, we're the type of company, we have a lot of remote users. We have users that sometimes don't come in and check into our network for 30 days, 60 days. Obviously, by not doing that, they're not getting, they're not getting the up-to-date GPOs, they're not getting the up-to-date update for their workstations. That is one of the major challenges that we have as a company in securing our endpoints once they're off our premises.
Certainly, and that's been an interesting challenge even before all of this, right? The working from home or rather working from outside of the office location with VPNs, the sales team have always faced that challenge, and I should say failed as well a lot of times because they're not connected to the VPNs often, and clearly there is need for some sort of a cloud-based approach to that. But where do you start? So even just looking at knowing what kind of devices are being used by the different users out there, especially when they're remote or even if they're not remote. I mean, that itself is a daunting task to start to and to begin with. And so it's not an easy challenge at all.
No, that is definitely not an easy job. One of the issues we've been seeing, especially with some of our remote users, as we've been trying to get them connected with the VPN, is if their machine is not up to date, our VPN, we perform a host check. Our VPN will not allow them to connect. And obviously, like I said, if they have not been on network on premises, they probably won't have those needed updates that they need. So, one of the things that my company is definitely looking for, or was definitely looking for, was a cloud-based solution to help us achieve making sure that these endpoints stay protected, whether they're on premises or off premises.
So do you use some sort of a CMDB? I mean, how do you keep that CMDB up to date? Because that's not straightforward.
Currently, right now, we don't have a current CMDB that keeps assets realistically up to date. We we have started to leverage a application um, that we have started to use, and we're kind of on the leaning side of going with using Qualys for the fact that with the application does not have remote agents, so users would have to be on-prem or on VPN for their machines to check back in. And one of the things that I've noticed I've been able to work with VMDR is deploying some cloud agents to some of my endpoints. So I can see them checking in. I can see the inventory of them. So
Right.
From an asset inventory standpoint, um, we think that this will be the direction that we will be going.
Okay. So from a vulnerability detection perspective, obviously Qualys does a great job, and we help find a lot of different types of vulnerabilities across a different set of assets. And today, with the increasing infrastructure, there's just a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that have to be addressed, and a lot of organizations struggle with prioritizing which ones to fix first. So how are you addressing this at ATN? What are you guys doing to get ahead of this?
Well, I can tell you from a personal point on that. Like I said, I've been using Qualys for over a year and a couple months now. And last year, while I was in my previous position, we actually had a project to remediate about 700 plus servers. At that time, I think it was the Blue Keep remediation was out, or the Blue Keep
Yeah.
virus was out, and we were doing it manually. We were using Qualys to scan the machines, let us know if we were able to repair it. But we were in there as a team working nightly, um, manually patching these servers. Um, and the thing about it is every Monday or every week, begin every week, we had to provide an executive report, and we were keeping stats in an Excel sheet. What I've seen with VMDR is with the prioritization, we could have actually created, if we had VMDR at the time, we would have been able to create a dashboard that allows us to have a single pane of glass to go in and see, hey, this amount of servers were patched. We have this amount of servers left. So, that's one functionality that I definitely see as a plus that we will be utilizing. Um, I kind of wish we had it last year, would have made the job a whole lot easier last year.
Yeah, you and me too. Even I wish we had delivered this a little bit earlier, but we had to build a lot of stuff around the platform to really make this work, which is not easy. But going back to Bluekeep, right? I think that's a great example of why prioritization is needed, because you want to address a vulnerability like Bluekeep through a proper prioritization process before it becomes exploitable, right? Otherwise, it just ends up being a fire drill, and everybody's jumping and putting resources into that one task at a given point of time. And that's kind of what was the premise, and what we've really focused on in with VMDR is to bring that ability to detect the vulnerabilities and do the prioritization in a very easy and straightforward manner, so that it can really hopefully make things a lot easier for you.
Yeah, definitely can see that moving forward. Like I said, I'm loving the cloud agent. I'm loving the statistics we get, the information we get back from the cloud agent. You know, I'm loving the fact that for my company, we perform weekly scans of our servers, and with the cloud agent, I can get a report. I can get daily reports on it. We can get a ticket open up if a severity 5 or a severity 4 happens to appear on a server, instead of having to wait an entire week to review the report. So that's one of the features that I'm definitely think I'm going to enjoy with VMDR.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean the agent teams would love to hear that feedback, that agent is really helping customers out there. One of the things that we focused on the architecture was really to have a single agent architecture that is extremely lightweight, sending telemetry information back to the platform, and that one agent is able to do everything from asset inventory vulnerability management, patch management, configuration assessment, file integrity monitoring, IOC, indication of compromise detection, and so on and so forth. Because this sort of so-called best of breed approach where you end up having way too many agents, I don't think that really works that well. And so I mean, what do you think people today moving forward, like what do you think of this multi-agent strategy?
And I'm never a fan of having many agents on a machine. Many agents require many take up resources on your machine. You have some agents that use very little resources, and you have some agents that are very resource heavy. For the fact that we can get we can get asset inventory, we can get vulnerability management, and we can get patch management all in one agent. I'm very happy for that. That's gonna and I think my users will also be happy for that. Not that they may notice, but you know at least they'll be working a lot better on their machines without having several agents to do without having several agents to do several tasks. You have one agent to do several tasks.
The other thing I wanted to check with you on was the response, right? It's one thing to have detect all the vulnerabilities and give a report to the IT team, but the IT teams also struggle a lot because taking vulnerabilities and converting them into patches is not straightforward. That takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of man hours to really try to figure out how a particular CVE maps to a specific file that needs to be installed on a specific host. And IT teams take a long time and they struggle with that and leave that organization exposed during that period of time. So how are you looking at it? How are you addressing this challenge?
Oh, so like I told you before, we used to do manually patch. We used to manually patch. Um, we would get the reports from Qualys and review all the reports, and from the reports we would go out and manually remediate what we need to remediate. Through the use of VMDR, I've been able to work on machines where I've been able to patch just not the Windows OS, but also third-party applications. I've been able to see vulnerabilities show up, and mind you, I haven't been using VMDR that long, so it's not totally out to my entire company. But for the users that I have the agent installed on, we are able to see. I think there was a vulnerability that came out the other day. It's slipping my mind. But I was able to go in to VMDR. I was able to see in the patch management this vulnerability, and I was able to see that there was a patch available for it. And the agents that were on the units that are on agent, I was able to deploy the patches to them. This is very, very cool. Love this feature. The fact that you have an all-in-one tool, a tool that's going to give you your vulnerability and allow you to patch at the same time, is definitely efficient in terms of time. I can't tell you how many times we've scanned servers and figured that we remediated it, and it wasn't remediated when we rescan it the second time, and here you have to go back and work on it another time. So and then the automated piece of it is incredible too. It's several clicks and a patch is deployed to a machine. It's not complicated to use at all. I think I think I was in there using it before my account manager really got with me about it. And I was sending him emails left, right, center about it as I was seeing all sorts of cool stuff in there.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, as you said, that it really reduces the time from detecting the vulnerability to fixing it, and reduces the time the organization stays exposed to the threat. Now, one of the things, you've been an early adopter of so many different solutions that Qualys has brought about. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was the live and customizable dashboards. We're quite excited about it. These are backed by the Elasticsearch backend, very fast. Have you had a chance to play with it, and what's your feedback?
So yeah, I have looked at the dashboard, and the dashboards are very, very cool. With the cloud agent, you're actually able to keep a very real-time, up-to-date inventory of your machines that are vulnerable or that have been patched, all depending on what you choose to do with your dashboard. I like the fact that it's customizable to a point. Um, I can say, hey, I can create a dashboard with a Step 5 vulnerability, and I can see how many of my servers um, have this vulnerability, and it keeps a running tab as through the use of the cloud agent and the fact that the cloud agent checks in every couple of hours. Um, it keeps a nice running tab to help like, hey, we went from 30 machines today to 25 machines tomorrow. Um, let you know that your guys are working, your team is out there doing the thing, or that your automated processes are running and working.
That's right. Our out of the box dashboards, burn down charts really are helpful to track progress, right? You need to see what kind of progress you're making pretty quickly in a live manner. And that's what those burn down charts that we have, they help with. Now, another element of this one is the human element, right? I think a lot of times the security teams get hounded by the business units to say, oh, I deployed the patch and it still hasn't updated. I don't see the progress, and you have to wait for the scans to be run over the weekend. And so I think those live dashboards, which are continuously updated with the agent and just self-service, giving them that visibility, I think that really helps kind of have them do a lot of these things themselves. And so hopefully they're easy to use. How was your experience? I mean, did you have to have a lot of hand holding, or was it straightforward to use?
I needed a little hand holding from the team. Let me correct. I needed a lot of hand holding from the team. Just because I never used the dashboards before in Qualys. Even though, like I said, I've been using the program for so long, I've never had to go to that part. I've always focused on, going straight to the scans, the support, so forth. So to see the dashboard, to use the dashboard, I did have to get some help, a lot of help from the Qualys team. They even showed me their support site where Qualys, the engineers on the Qualys side create dashboards for you. You
Yeah.
can keep up to date whatever severity is out there. Whenever if a vulnerability pops up, you guys are already on the job creating dashboards for me so that I don't have to create a dashboard.
Yeah, we're here to help. I mean, that's the advantage of the cloud model and the community model, right? We can create these dashboards and have them available. And you've been a great supporter and a great contributor also for a long time. And soon we are also coming up with a way to really provide ability to have customers actually provide and exchange dashboards on some sort of a dashboard exchange or something like that. And that should also make this even more useful, because it's not just Qualys putting out dashboards, it's users also doing that. So hey Daryl, so we're coming up on our time. Great conversation, really insightful, and as always, a very honest feedback. We're looking forward to incorporate that in our upcoming releases as well. So wanted to check if you had any last comments to provide our audience and folks who are here like you, who are trying to figure out how to make this entire process quick and easy, and be able to do more given the times that we are in.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can really say is, when you try it out, test it out, see if it works for what you wanted to do. We saw what challenges we had. And one of the great things for me now moving into this position as the vulnerability manager is that I came from the server administration. So
Yeah.
I saw what challenges that the server administration team had in terms of being able to patch. And as that comes down to being part of a IT security, priority, the fact that I can now help my former team by providing them with a solution that does not only scan and keep a real-time scanning, but also can assist with patching. I think that's a win for our team.
So there you go. As Daryl said, it's extremely easy. So the best way is to try it yourself. So another advantage of a SaaS model is you can try it for yourself. Go to the website, sign up for VMDR, and get a trial going pretty quickly. And you can see for yourself and give us feedback on how that works out for you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the presentation and especially the live demo of VMDR at this VMDR live event. And again, thank you everyone for attending and staying behind for this section. And here we're going to get a customer perspective about how the customers today see how VMDR is really going to help solve some of the challenges that they are facing today in the day-to-day world. And here with me from Dallas, Fort Worth is George Volafontaine, and he works for Toyota Financial. Toyota Financial has been a long-time customer of Qualys, and I thank George for taking the time. So George, thank you, and welcome to this event.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So before we get into talking about shop, let's hear from you how today you are kind of seeing this change environment and the change world, and maybe you can start by giving a little background on what you do with Toyota Financial, large global organization, and then maybe give a little perspective of how things have changed since. The whole work from home has come up, and how that has impacted security and what you guys are seeing right now and how you are addressing that.
All right. Well, Toyota Financial Services is spread across multiple countries across the world. We here in the United States are spearheading this effort. We support all of the countries by offering Qualys to each one of them. We manage all that from a central location here. The use of Qualys in its origins many years ago was just used for doing patch management. In other words, it was the tool to discover what needed to be patched or what needed to be hardened. Since the changes, Qualys has added more and more modules and has added more and more data to the collection of data that they perform. And we've been using this data to better improve our risk posture across the organization. One of the things that VMDR has been offering to me, which is much more than I've ever had before in my hands, is an asset management tool that's much more accurate than what we've ever had. The fact that we're able to better understand our assets, we not only just perform authenticated scans, but we've deployed agents to over 10,000 of our devices, servers and mobile devices, that it has improved the value and the quantity of data, such as if we're looking to see if just one piece of software is installed from a licensing point of view, or if we need to patch, something as simple as Wireshark. There are so many small pieces of software that are used by some of the engineers and architects that are usually not maintained as part of a big organization doing their patch management program. We're able to identify those outliers, which is much better than we've ever done before. Because of having all that data and having it organized better, because we're using the asset management side of Qualys to better understand and break up the organization. For example, each one of our countries is in their own business unit. We've also set up networks within each one of those, so if there's overlapping IP space. But by doing that, we're able to do a measured key risk indicator, KRI, off of each one of the countries and compare them to one another. That comparison is, I'd like to, in very layman's terms, use it as the wall of shame. So in other words, we compare each of the countries against one another and we use, oh, this country is doing better than you, so why can't you do the same in that area?
It does.
So
It does
not
work,
only,
doesn't it? And I think what you highlight is really important that before you get into any complicated calculation of risk and all of that, the most basic of requirements today is just knowing what you have on the network and the asset management piece. And there's just no magic bullet. There's just no one way of doing it. So and it's not static, right? It's dynamic. It's ever changing. And I think that's a hard time that most organizations have, just trying to get that visibility. And as you mentioned, it's not just about the hardware; it's also getting down to the details of why are people using Wireshark in an environment, and maybe they downloaded it once and used it and never updated it. So I think it's really the starting point for any strong security program, I would say.
and really Qualys has stepped up to the plate to identify to know what you don't know. In other words, the way you discover, in the past you just were looking at versions of software so that we knew what to patch because they had CVEs, they had vulnerabilities, on and so forth. We're looking at the hardening in a very similar fashion, but now we're able to put much more context, metadata associated with that, and we're able to use your tool to better associate things. We're using tagging to its extreme so that we can relate for example, the cloud asset that we would have to a particular business unit, so that we can make sure that those assets are reported correctly to the right owners who would influence change on those devices. So our idea is not only to just tell people go patch. Our idea is to influence change in the environment and assist in re-architecting. Like every big business, I believe you'll see that there's a lot of companies that still have end-of-life software and operating systems. What we're doing is we're using Qualys to identify those, but we're also taking it one step further, and we're trying to push for compensating controls, such as using the network and isolating those devices if at all possible. So there are many different things that we use the Qualys data, and much more of it than we ever have in the past.
And I think that's a great point, that you have the starting point, you find out about your assets, but at the end of the day, it's you need to do something about it, whether it's quarantine the device or at least know what needs to be done, or block the device or patch the device. And I think your point of the auto organization with tags is important. This is something I mentioned earlier in my presentation as well, is assets are changing so dramatically and dynamically, and most people don't have an idea. So the ability to kind of have that asset tagging capability, which dynamically keeps your assets organized, I think helps quite a bit. And then, of course, from that, you get into the assessment piece, and you guys have rolled out the agents in addition to some of the scanning capability, which kind of gives a much more holistic approach. But of course, that gives you a lot of in-depth information about a lot of the vulnerabilities that you have, and prioritization also becomes quite important. So wanted to see how you are tackling that today, and what are you seeing right now in terms of how you prioritize, because there is no sort of one size fits all prioritization approach, because it changes by the assets. So curious to see what you think about that.
Well, to your point, okay, things change fast, and I would like to take you down a path of looking at Kubernetes or Docker. In other words, that whole environment. Your tool is able to go in and look at the images of those inside of each one of those environments and give us vulnerability analysis of it. The thing about managing it at the image level is that we could have in a few minutes 200 images launched, and then as devices, as microservices, and then they could be turned down within the next 3 minutes. So it's so dynamic, so difficult. It would be extremely difficult to go chase down each one of those devices if we didn't have access to looking at the images in the back end. So because of the connectors that you have and the way that we actually look at those environments, we're able to stay much more attuned. It's the same thing in a slower way for any of the cloud environments, AWS or Google Cloud or any of Azure. What we're getting from you with your connectors is a true representation of the environment, because they go so fast in deploying. They're using scripts, Terraform scripts, for example, in our case, that they're pushing new builds and then tearing them down in a matter of hours or days. If we were doing the traditional scanning method, we wouldn't be able to stay on top of it. We'd just, we'd be playing whack-a-mole.
That's true. It's such an ephemeral environment, and so the best way to be able to get a handle of that security is to be able to integrate whatever tools you have right up front in the DevOps lifecycle with the CI/CD, so that you can eliminate as much as you can beforehand. And then, of course, there's going to be other devices that you have on the network that that you don't build or you don't deploy. So for that today, how are you guys looking at prioritization